When I talk to people about John Quincy Adams, they tend to reply to me with three questions, especially as it relates to how I'm talking about it in Marketer in Chief. The first question they ask is, what's so important about the Monroe Doctrine? Maybe I read about that in high school American history, but I don't remember what the hell you're talking about. Number two, why are we talking about the James Monroe Doctrine in a chapter about John Quincy Adams? It's not called the Adams Doctrine, it's the Monroe Doctrine. Why are we covering it here instead of in the chapter 5? We're covering it in chapter 6. And then third, who the fuck is John Quincy Adams? I thought we already had a president named John Adams. Who's this guy? So I'd like to do two things today. I'd like to read an excerpt from Marketer in Chief that'll help us answer the first question: what is the Monroe Doctrine and why is it important? And kind of how does it relate to a kind of a sales and marketing question? How can we better understand it that way? But before I do that, before I read the excerpt, I'd like to answer the two other questions. The second question, which was, well, why are we talking about the Monroe Doctrine in a chapter on John Quincy Adams? That question is actually pretty simple to answer. The Monroe Doctrine was written by John Quincy Adams when he was Secretary of State under James Monroe. And it was his diplomatic skill. He's one of the most accomplished diplomats that the United States ever produced. And when he became president, he was the president after James Monroe. So the Monroe Doctrine, as it became known, it wasn't known that at the time, he was able to have 4 years to kind of work to implement his own policy that he created as Secretary of State. Back in those days, Secretary of State was kind of that stepping stone to the presidency in a way that it really isn't today, and it hasn't been for a long time. First question, who the fuck is John Quincy Adams? Didn't we already have a guy named John Adams? The answer is yes, we did. John Adams was president number 2. And his son, John Quincy Adams, was president number 6. So we've had a few times like that where we've had families and family relationships in the White House. Most notably and most recently, George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, father and son, in the last half of the 20th century. So we absolutely have examples of that before. And this is exactly the same thing. John Adams and John Quincy Adams were father and son. So let's get to that bigger question, though, on why is the Monroe Doctrine important and how can we kind of understand it a little bit better, kind of take all the kind of geopolitics aside, and let's talk about it as if it were a marketing agreement. So here's an excerpt from Chapter 6, Marketer in Chief, coming July 4th, 2021. In a very modern sense, however, the Monroe Doctrine is simply an example of an exclusive territory agreement. We see these types of agreements all the time in our commercial lives. When you attend a sporting event at a stadium, only certain brands of soft drinks or beer are available. You may only buy a certain brand or licensed team merchandise. Why is that? The venue has negotiated with those brands for exclusive opportunity to sell within their walls. There's nothing illegal about that. You're free not to attend a sporting event that serves only Budweiser beer if you're a Miller fan. The benefits are obvious. By controlling the commercial options within a sphere of influence, you can restrict options and raise prices. Ever wonder why a crappy beer at your favorite stadium costs $15 fucking? That's why. It's the same reason you find Amazon exclusive product, services, and programming available only through its website. As it turned out, comparing the Monroe Doctrine to a commercial agreement is more appropriate than you might think. Despite the reaction of the British press, the British government was most concerned about their growing global trading empire. If rival European powers, the Spanish especially, managed to keep control of their American colonies during their wars of independence, British trade would be severely curtailed. While the United States wrote the Monroe Doctrine to protect international trade routes with the Americas, the British certainly saw it that way. In effect, the document helped Great Britain maintain open supply lines for the free flow of raw materials and finished goods. And because the British Navy could guarantee safe passage, it essentially created a monopoly on trade. One could make the argument that the Monroe Doctrine helped build the British Empire more than it helped American commerce through the early decades of the 1800s. Funny how things turn out, isn't it? All right, that's an excerpt. Sorry for the stumbles in the middle there. It's one of the first times I'm reading it. So I'm getting part of this whole process of recording some of these videos for you is to give me a little practice on reading these chapters, at least excerpts of them, before I kind of get into the full boat of reading the audiobook. So I'm excited to do it. Thanks for being patient with me. Enjoy this. Make sure to get your copy of Marketer in Chief. You can pre-order it, the ebook on Amazon right now, and print book, audiobook, all of that will be available on July 4th, wherever books are sold.